Logie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister and asks, does he stand by his reported comments that the government would need to seek advice before deciding whether a Royal Commission into domestic violence and child abuse, which Owen Glenn has offered to fund, was necessary?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I stand by my actual response to the question, which was, we need to consider all of the issues of what might come out of the Royal Commission, so that's something, quote, I haven't taken advice on yet.
Jan Logie.
Why does the Green Paper not deal directly with domestic violence, given that every year police attend 73,000 domestic violence call-outs and report that 70% of these cases also involve child abuse?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think if the member wants a very detailed answer, she really should put the question down to the Minister. But what I can say is the Green Paper on vulnerable children actually tangentially deals with that issue because, by definition, vulnerable children are often the subject of domestic violence.
Jan Logie.
Speaker, how can he tell this House that the government is serious about domestic violence when they've recently closed the Family Violence Unit in MSD, cut funding to domestic violence education programs, and reduced the funding for family violence sector to a state of chaos?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, well, firstly, I'd reject the statements made by I wouldn't even put them as questions, I already put them as statements by the member. But let me just say this, in terms of what the work we've undertaken in 2012 alone, the White Paper on Vulnerable Children will be released later this year has had over 10,000 submissions, something we're looking closely at. The Health Select Committee has had inquiry into preventing child abuse and improving children's health outcomes. Obviously, there's the Ministerial Committee, which is being led and co-chaired by Bill English and Taliana Turia, and there's Expert Advisory Group on Solutions to Child Poverty. They are just some of the background work we're doing, which is informing the policies that the government has been operating.
Jan Logie.
Supplementary. Given all the international evidence indicates a direct, as well as our local police statistics indicate a direct link between domestic violence and child abuse, given the evident severity of this problem in New Zealand, which is getting worse, and given the evident poor institutional response, how can the Prime Minister not commit to support an inquiry to find a long-term sustainable solution to domestic violence, including child abuse?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think we'd take issue with the statement by the member that it's getting worse. I think the information we have is it's probably levelling off. In terms of the work the government's been doing, there are many, many strands of that. But if the purpose of the member's question is to say, does the government support Owen Glenn using part of the very generous $80 million donation he's made into funding a Royal Commission of Inquiry, then the answer to that is no, we don't support that. And the reason for that is because my own view is that is an incredibly generous act from Owen Glenn, but he would be better to spend the money on the ground solutions in at-risk communities, because frankly, this country's had a lot of inquiries over the last decade, and we need to move towards some practical solutions. He should use his money for that.
Jacinda Ardern, supplementary question.
To the Prime Minister. Does he agree then that the inquiry into the determinants of wellbeing for Māori children by the Māori Affairs Select Committee, the inquiry into preventing child abuse and improving children's health outcomes by the Health Select Committee, the Expert Advisory Group on Solutions to Child Poverty by the Children's Commissioners Expert Group, and the Green Paper process into vulnerable children means we have the evidence we need, but the issue lies in the Minister allocating in the budget a mere $6 million to respond to all of this work?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
No. What I think is that there's a variety of different strands of information gathering and inquiring going on, and frankly, having another one isn't probably going to take us very far. This country has an issue when it comes to domestic violence. It has an issue when it comes to child abuse. But actually, if Owen Glenn wants to use his $80 million, and it's an incredibly generous donation, I think if he went out to South Auckland and spent that money on the ground in that community, he'll make a bigger difference.
Question number 10, the Honourable Annette King.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.